and went back to my old sector of health and HIV. For 7 years I was working with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. What I would just like to add to what you said in the last, the level and the stakes and the steps of the participation remain same, but each sector is at a different level, be it water sector or say poverty management or health sector or gender, and each sector is at a different level and different this thing. In HIV, there is supposed to be a good level of participation. There is a term called greater involvement of people living with HIV, GPA, they say. And I'll share my experience. I mean, the GPA policy was formulated nationally with NACO, with the stakeholder consultations at regional level, at state level, national level. But the bureaucracy was somewhere, scared. If we give them the accountability, they might drag us to the court. Because HIV community per se is very strong. And they can sit and get out the Secretary of the Government of India to say why medicines are not there in Manipur. They are readily monitoring and they are readily actively participating. So that fear is also there in the other side of the table. So that also needs to be common.
The term accountability, which has often been used in terms of mostly in developing countries, government or powers accountability toward people. But nowadays, Delhi and Delhi Road, I keep asking these questions, people's accountability. So horizontal accountability, my neighbor driver's accountability towards me. Because many times we use the term social responsibility or citizen duties, but somewhere that accountability aspect does not come. So that's the point one which I want, if you both of you could say something on that, how it would be converted into that stringent accountability mechanism. The second thing, John, which you was referring to in terms of economic aspect and economic inequality, at least looking at the statistics, when we come to listen that 80% of world resources are concentrated in few hands, and all around the world privatization is happening. So some power, economic power in the hand of people. What would work? Because knowledge is one thing which is important, but again the knowledge is also being controlled by the same people, because there are many knowledge producing machines. So in that context, how to move forward?
Participation has declined to a certain extent and accountability aspect has been highlighted more. For example, if we were to take example from PRIs. And whereas at the same time, accountability of certain sectors, like for example big businesses or industries, where is their accountability? So as you also mentioned, that economic decisions have probably taken over these aspects, these two aspects. They have affected them. It appears that they have affected these two participation and accountability a lot. And in current context, it appears more so, because industries, what is their accountability? But when it comes to smaller organization or powerless like PRIs, we are asking them questions, lot of questions. So it appears that so my question is, how in the current context it has been affecting various sectors that affect our day-to-day lives. As Manoj ji is saying, traffic on Delhi roads. Car companies are producing cars and we have to, finance is available to buy, so everybody who's earning 10,000 can buy a car. But where are the roads? So what is our accountability and what is the industry's accountability? What is the government's accountability?
I'm Sharmishna, I work with Access. So we have been using your framework immensely. In fact, yesterday I was also working on that, using on some of the gender issues. My 2 points, the participation, as you expressed, participation has been used as an abusive word in the development sector. And I don't know how far it has been in a true sense it has used, and whether it has been using or not. That remains as a question. Second thing is, as you said, there are 7 areas that really needs to be worked on, needs to be thought upon it. And I still feel that somewhere many civil societies, particularly civil societies, working sort of in a silos, as throughout the discussion it came up quite strongly. But the challenge then remains how to interconnect all these areas, because there has to be some integration within these areas. If you look at only economic or just social, it may not work. It has to be overlap to each other and integrated in it. So why it is a challenge? Because government, if you look at the political areas, government doesn't want to also include civil societies. It has that area, that space has shrunk. So that remains a challenge. And then if you look at the financial feasibility, in terms of donors are also shrinking, and then new sort of donors are also emerging, how they are acceptable to approach in these areas. So there are many challenges. So I'm just thinking, where to find out and how to bridge all these gaps, how to interconnect these civil societies, and make it like a real development.
Well, thank you so much. I have 3 reflections, and most probably all 3 are connected. So my first reflection is on our effort to institutionalize participation. And in our earlier work, we saw participation from a bottom-up point of view. And we always tried to build institutions of people which would be more inclusive and democratic in nature. But I guess in the rush of institutionalizing participation very quickly, I thought those institutions were not so inclusive, and when particularly it came from the top, and with some policies to institutionalize participation, including our example like Gran Sabha or other committees through which we thought that participation will be enhanced. So some reflection on the timing of institutionalization and the prerequisites or the preparations that it requires before we quickly institutionalize the participation. I think the second point is talked about economic inequality, and perhaps among many other things we forgot the work that we started on access and control over means of production, and somehow that means of production has been sort of in a way appropriated by power holders, whether it's the market or even the state, and it never came back to people. So that journey has remained in a way inadequate and incomplete. So how do we bring back that discourse in the framework of participation? And third is the question that who demands accountability? And again, accountability has taken over the discourse on engagement and participation, but mostly it has been sort of occupied by intermediate civil society groups. And even the sort of basic requisite for demanding accountability, which is voice and representation, both voice and representation have been replaced by the intermediaries as opposed to grassroots organizations demanding their voice, their representation, and their space for accountability.
Take this question about the economic inequality issue that you also triggered, and a couple of people have raised this issue. In the last 10 years, implicit and widespread acceptance of an economic model, which many of us have bought into. And a basic tenet of that economic model is not necessarily linked to distribution of means of production or natural resources, but it has more to do with livelihoods. And there's a lot of emphasis in Indian policies these days on startups. Everybody is talking about startups. Even Government of India has started a program of startups. But the startups require a wider ecosystem, and which essentially means influential networks, connections, access to banks, access to land, access to a variety of things which you don't have. And so it again shifts the shifts the responsibility to the individual as opposed to the larger network of institutional arrangements. And economic inequality, therefore, is even justified as a transitional phenomenon, because people are moving from this area to that area, economy is shifting, we are becoming a service economy, etc., etc. So there is a period of inequality. Some people will make more money. This larger economic model is not being challenged. And my sense is that all our environmental problems, climate change problems, ecological problems, are very closely linked to this economic model. And unless we question the economic model, which is highly centralized, highly, globally manipulated, so to speak, we need to revisit this question of economic model. A much more decentralized, local, you look at food security. You can't have food security based on imported wheat from Brazil or US or Australia. Food security requires basic food to be eaten and available within 50-100 kilometers of where you live. But we have, so I'm concerned that attention to the economic model in our analysis, as you pointed out, it's almost like accepting, representative democracy as the manifestation of democracy, and not challenging representative democracy in terms of its counterbalancing, countervailing participatory democracy. So, that's my sense.
I think you're right, and we see it promoted in some of the programs that do promote economic empowerment. So the growth of the notion of women's economic empowerment has been very strong. And you have a lot of corporations and so on providing programs for women's economic empowerment. But what form of economic empowerment is that? My colleague Andrea Cornwall calls it participation light. It's basically, we want to empower you to participate in our market economy with a little bit of loan or a little bit of access to business. But it's separating that form of empowerment with, as you point out, it's still disconnected from other forms of social and political empowerment. And we've done work and tried to find examples that a little bit of women's economic empowerment, does it translate to greater social power in the home, in the workplace, in the local governments? There's very little evidence to show, because it's isolating that little bit and drawing into the existing. So I think, our work here argues that inequality is a multi-dimensional fact, and the dimensions of inequality around social and gender norms and economic and political voice, they intersect in everyday life. They're not lived in everyday life in silos. You don't wake up today and say, today I'm going to deal with gender inequality in my life, and tomorrow I'm going to deal with economic inequality, and this day I'll talk to this NGO, and that day I'll talk to this NGO, and that day. So I think one of our models of success, or indicators of our own work, is whatever program we have to do has to be designed to deal with multidimensional forms of inequality. And we have to measure our success. Did it change 2 or 3 forms of exclusion at the same time, not just one? And that's very difficult because the donors aren't looking in that way. They all have their separate programs. But we have to show that if we only fix one piece, it will be countered by another piece. So I think multidimensional approach is very important. Now, in terms of how that relates to the economic, my most recent work, I took a few years and I was based in Canada at the Coady International Institute. And they've done a lot of work more on citizen-driven economies and livelihoods than I had before. It was good to learn a lot from them. But we did a book together, which just come out, called Citizen-Led Innovation for a New Economy. And what we did was look around North America for the new programs that we feel were emerging at the grassroots, which were forms of organizing and empowerment that tried to link the political, the social, the environmental, the economic at once. And there are many emerging. So I feel it's actually the seeds of this new understanding of a new economic model is occurring around the grassroots. And if you look all over the world at the forms of solidarity economies and alternative forms of economic development that are trying to bring these multi-dimensions together, they are there, but we haven't documented them. And I think it would be great if we could start documenting in India and other places where are the new ways of working that have an implicit new model, because the current model is unsustainable.
Yeah.
Environmentally, for whatever reason, unsustainable. What's growing from below that we haven't yet recognized? And I think to go back to the grassroots and look at the new alternatives that are emerging and document them, and then talk from the base of that to, okay, what is government and donors and others doing to support this new form of development is very important. A few other questions. You gave us so many other questions. Yeah.
On the accountability question, let us return to the accountability questions that several people have raised. There are 3 things that are coming to my mind in relation to the comments. Firstly, that accountability issue cannot be separated from, as we have been saying, participation, voice, representation, those elements. So if you jump into accountability without voice and representation, then we are in a way short-circuiting sustainability of accountability, because participation, voice and representation builds the scaffolding on which you demand accountability. And that's what is happening with intermediaries or accountability experts floating around, and to some extent, being displaced through media. In countries like ours, media is demanding accountability, television, newspaper, but it is not necessarily echoing or amplifying the voice of those on whose behalf accountability. So this, on somebody else's behalf, this kind of, it is coming from intermediaries, it's coming from experts of accountability, and media is displacing that. So in a way, you're reinforcing passivity as opposed to activity. And the third part about accountability is, sort of what in our book we also talked about, horizontal accountability, which is between citizens and communities and neighborhoods, and we are reaching a situation where we are not paying attention to horizontal accountability, and in fact pushing increasingly more responsibility to public institutions, to state. So the practices of social mediation and neighborhood conciliation that used to exist, you know. So if your dog bites my dog, I immediately report to the police as opposed to saying, look, you know, let's have a chat, you know, why is your dog biting my dog? Can we do something about it? Then we'll file a police case, then we will chase the police, and then, you know. So the social communitarian mechanisms of mutual rights and obligations as community, as society, as neighborhoods, that notion needs to be reinforced. Otherwise, you can't have a police or a law for everything that human interaction doesn't work for. You can't know.
Yeah. I think we've, in our citizenship BRC work, we talked about the vertical forms of citizenship by which citizens hold the states and institutions to account. But the horizontal forms are just as important, the ways that people take care of each other. And so it's not just the holding each other to account, your dog bite my dog, but the way we give mutual support, forms of solidarity with each other. And that form of social engagement is very important. And it comes to a little bit to, I think in all of this work, comes to your question, Manoj, and a couple of others, we pay more attention to the tools of accountability than we have the norms of accountability, the values. Ultimately, accountability isn't about filing a report card. Ultimately, accountability is about how we take care of each other and how institutions respond. And that links to your question about what about the government? We haven't paid enough attention to the people on the supply side. Ultimately, what's our goal is that every bureaucrat should be monitored by citizens? Or is it that, no, they don't have to be monitored anymore because they've already internalized the norm that they should be responsive? And until we can get that internalization of those norms vertically and with each other, then I don't think we've really succeeded. And that comes to the intermediation question. In development, we're very good at having the tool and then saying that since we have this hammer, everybody's problem must be the nail. And it goes back to what Miles Horton said. I sometimes feel like it's true in this debate now. We've decided that social accountability is everybody's problem, and we have their solution, which is this. We're not going and asking them, what is your problem? How do you hold people to account in your own way, in your own informal methods? I think we really have to step back and ask, what are people doing for themselves? How are they acting? How are they holding each other and governments to account? And start with that practice, rather than think that we as the latest intermediaries have the latest global tool and we're going to come and give people the answer to the problem we think they should have. And that requires that's an old lesson in development, but we constantly have to remind ourselves of that lesson.
Other comments? Any other set of comments? Some of these are comments or questions we also share, and there's no easy answer.
No answer, easy answer.
But some of you may have other comments on the relationship between participation and accountability, and the kind of work we are doing.
I think one more thing which I meant to mention, actually it came up at our seminar I was at yesterday, and it came up for you, this whole notion of lifestyle accountability is becoming more and more important. Or how in our own lifestyles are we demonstrating our concern for the environment, for each other, for concerns over gender relations, etc. And I think that's become around the world for what we consume, who we consume it from. I think those choices of personal choices are now very important areas for everybody, and particularly for the growing middle classes around the world. That unless we can institutionalize some of these concerns in our own lifestyles, then we have no right to go and be talking about other people, to be bringing about change in their lifestyles.
Yes,
I mean, just taking from where you said there's a knowledge inequality. After that, there's also this digital inequality, and digital inequality has given rise to a lot of, say, social media and internet, social media, and they, while at one level, encourage participation, but also make it difficult what to do with the tools for marketing. I mean, nowadays every message going around on WhatsApp, some lie, some white lie, and some truth. So how do you monitor those, and how do you ensure the accountability of those? That would be.
It's a big, new, important area. You know, a lot of us thought about digital and access to digital as a way of amplifying voice, but we didn't pay enough attention. But it's also a way of amplifying the values and voice we don't want to have. So online becomes a new way for hate speech, for sexual harassment, for promoting violence. And the dark side of what's happening in this field is very important. And so it's a new arena of struggle, right? That it's not what kinds. It's no longer just about whose voice, but what are the values in those voices that we're promoting. It's not. I think one of the biggest limitations of the power cube, and great to see that here that it's being used. It's being used lots of places, but you know, the power cube has these dimensions of these spaces, but we don't talk enough about what values do we want to put in those spaces. It's not just who has power, but it's power for what? And power with what values? And we have to articulate those values even more strongly, I think, today.
Akila, yeah.
When we talk about participation, we keep saying equity. Like we talk about to start from where people are. The moment it transforms into accountability, I don't know, probably I understand it like that it's generally that holding the other responsibility. So if I take an example from the field or from where I work with the community, and you know, when I go to person XYZ, the XYZ would say, no, the situation today is because of the other. So how do you get equity when it comes to accountability? That is, you know, for example, yesterday itself, when I was reading the environment issue or the pollution in Delhi, the first decision taken by the center was ask the farmers to stop, you know, burning the front. So is that the real reason? Is you know, every other nearby state was asked about this. So if that was the real reason, like how do you get equity when it comes to accountability? Probably you can share something from your experience.
Pastor, you want to say that?
Just reflecting on power cube and the question that Madhu just sort of brought in. You conceptualized the space and sort of in a way you talked about invited space and invented space. And it's been about 15 years that you have conceptualized that space concept. In the current context, my sort of question is that would you go with the same conceptualization, or given the I mean, it's a heavy word but and a loaded word, the kind of what you call it, the repercussion from the state to any voice or representation where such economic model is questioned, or where critical questions are not sort of appreciated by many governments, not one government, but across the globe. That's the tendency. So do you think that there are still opportunities for invented spaces and advancing the concerns that people have and holding those state institutions accountable, using those invented spaces?
Just say one or two things in response to those 2-3 comments, just and then you can. The first issue is if you see what is going on, at least in India, for the last 5-6 years, ever since transparency and accountability discourse became part of the government of India's actions, there is a assumption that if you can open a website and you can give digital form and digital tool, then transparency and accountability happens. It is a myth. As John is pointing out, it's more a question of values and principles as opposed to just a tool. So for a lot of people, so you ask, is the entire right to information, everything you want to know is on the website. Okay. Which language, which idiom, even if I understand that language, the manner in which you have written it up, and it's almost the same discussion that 20 years ago we used to have with the World Bank on information disclosure. The World Bank used to say we have a policy of information disclosure. All our reports are available on World Bank websites. Now, for the primary stakeholder of tribal in Odisha, it's an irrelevant information disclosure. In fact, it is information closure, not disclosure. And you can absolve yourself by saying, we have a policy. So this current tendency to say, we have a website, you can get information electronically, you can file your comment information. No, it's a problematic situation in relation to accountability and digital world. The second is that the norms of accountability are not just institutional norms, they are also societal norms. It's a point that one or two of you have raised. If in society we don't feel that there are relevant actions on our part to be accountable to our neighbors, mutually show solidarity, then those norms do not translate into the institutions. It's the same as gender discrimination. If gender discrimination remains a part of the societal phenomenon, it will become a part of our institutions as well, because institutions import societal phenomena. So accountability norms in our culture, it's just not there. That debate is, as a societal cultural debate, has not happened. And that's why people appoint anybody they like, their brother-in-law, and there is no conflict of interest. The big discourse with Tata Group for last 2 weeks is actually a conflict of interest discourse, which is not seen as conflict of interest because there is no meaning of accountability in that sense.
I was recently at this World Bank meeting, and they were using this phrase that the social accountability is the bridge that will connect citizens and states and rebuild the social relationship between citizens and states. And in the end, I was asked to say a few summary words. So I took on this metaphor of the bridge, and I've done a blog on this, maybe some of you have seen it. Because bridge is a nice idea, that we will connect the citizen to state. But if you think about a bridge, first of all, a bridge is only as strong as either end. So you can't have accountability at the same time that you have closing space for citizens and civil society. It's a contradiction for the World Bank to say we're promoting social accountability, but we're taking away the programs to support civil society. Because this end of the weak bridge will be weak. It's also, you can't have, unless the other end of the bridge is strong, that is, you have a state with bureaucrats that are willing to hold that bridge up. If they're going to ignore that bridge, they're going to be a weak anchor. So this notion of a bridge as the connector only works if you're going to hold up both ends, and if the donors, and we're going to keep struggling to keep civil society space open and talk about the responsibilities of the states to respond. The other thing about a bridge is a bridge can be designed by engineers, but it has to be adapted for every local contour, every local space. This phone you've given me is ringing. Somebody's telling me it's time to stop, I guess. Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So you can't have the same bridge everywhere. You know, the contour, the landscape, the foundations will be different in every place. So that means we have to investigate the local reality to figure out how we will construct that bridge, not come with the one-size-fits-all bridge and say, here you have to put this on. And the third, my biggest concern, I said, was that we will have built on all these bridges, but we'll find out it's not the way that people want to go. Their walkways are going someplace else. Because we actually haven't started with their concern, whether or not, like I said before, that's what they need. So I think we can all take this metaphor of the bridge so far. And I also talk about, I talk a lot in one of the slideshows these days, what I call the tap dance. We constantly have a tap dance. So the tap dance has linking transparency, accountability, participation. You've got to have one with the other. But to be a really good dancer, the tap dance has power in the middle of all of them. That is real transparency, accountability, participation. Unless it transforms power relations, it's not really going to be very strong. It's going to be a very light form. And I think we aren't paying enough. To me, the ultimate indicator of do we have accountability is have power relations shifted? And power relations have shifted not only when people are speaking and behaving in new ways, but when the powerful are responding in new ways. And in fact, when they're responding because they think people will speak up, not even before they speak up, then you know that power has shifted and the norms of accountability have shifted. Which takes me to this question about the invited spaces and the created spaces. I think we rush so quickly to build institutionalized spaces that we know that those institutionalized spaces only work if the claimed spaces are still also strong. It's by having strong voices on the outside that you still hold the institutions to account. And we also talked, remember, about the closed spaces, those behind-the-scenes spaces. And we've also learned that you've got to have allies, champions of participation inside those closed spaces. So it's like the bridge. You can have invited participation, but unless you have strong, organized civil society on the outside holding people to account, and champions on the inside who want to keep those invitations open, then those spaces will be very weak as well. So I'm actually these days thinking much more about we need to start again and go back and listen to where are people claiming space and voice these days that aren't necessarily fitting our paradigm of where they ought to be. The other thing that, of course, I don't know how it applies so much, and I guess it does to parts of India, but I've got a new research program going that we've got some funding for now to say that how does this theory of change apply in spaces of violence and instability and conflict, which are now in majority parts of the world. And if you start asking that, our theory breaks down. And we talk about, first of all, we empower citizens. Well, empowerment's very difficult to do when you're facing violence in everyday life, either at the home or in the workplace or because of war and conflict. So fear and trauma, all those things, we haven't paid enough in our work on participation to think about how traumas of everyday violence affect people's ability to participate. And then our theory says you empower people and then they take social and political action. But what we're learning is that social and political action isn't always very progressive. It's not reflecting the kind of values we want to see. ISIS is a good example of people taking social and political action, but is that the form we want to see? We have to pay attention to this dark side of participation that we see arising everywhere. And then we think, our theory is that through empowered citizens and social action, we will get a more responsive government. But in many cases, we're not getting responsiveness, we're getting repressiveness. and how do we counter that oppression? So what we realize is this virtuous circle isn't always a virtuous circle. It's sometimes unvirtuous. So under what conditions do we make it virtuous, and how do we watch out for the unvirtuous side? Unfortunately, I think the unvirtuous side is arising everywhere. As you look at the way of participation that's happening in the United States now, around the Trump campaign, it's so anti-women, it's so anti-immigrant. The discourse that is there, but it's a discourse that blames the other for everything. Same thing's happening in the UK. And we have to pay attention. That's why, for me, the values of participation, not just the mechanisms, are absolutely critical. They're telling us it's time to stop.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot, John. And I think these are the kind of issues which we need to continue to struggle with and pay attention to. But there are challenges to the kind of work we have done, and context is different, and we have to therefore reinvent the values part. I think greater consensus needs to be established on core values of human habitation, mutual respect and pluralism and diversity and equality. I think without conversation on values, our efforts will become more fragmented and tool-oriented. So thank you.
Just to say thank you, because one of the lessons I think we learned from Miles Horton at Highlander, Highlander was never, it's had a global impact, but it was never very big. Miles said, if we get above 25, then I become an institution, and it's hard to respond to changing realities. And Highlander's ability was to shift with the times. And I think PRIA also showed an ability to shift with the times and the issues that are coming up. And that ability to read in the wind what's coming next and to shift so that you're there is one of the key organizational challenges that we face. But PRIA is to be congratulated on its 35th anniversary for how the impact it's had around the world, including on people like myself, but also for your ability to shift and change with the times to respond to the new need and the new moment. And I think we're in a new need and we're in a new moment, and we're still all trying to figure out a little bit exactly what it is.
Thank you. Thank you all.